Welcome once again to the Weston Way, the City of Weston's official podcast. Today's episode, we're going to take a deep dive into the fiscal year 2026 budget. Joining us in the studio today is Don Decker, our city manager, and Bryan Cahen, our director of budget. Now, we've met Don before, but it's Bryan's first time in the studio. So welcome, Bryan.
Thanks, Pam. Happy to be here.
And Don, glad to have you back to learn more about the fiscal year budget.
Well, I'm glad to be back, and it's good to see the podcast is continuing strong.
Now, before we get into learning about the budget, we'd like to kind of take a look back at some history that you all have. I know that you all have worked before in another local government. Tell us about how you met.
Absolutely. So a long time ago in a city not to be named, I had come down to Florida to start working. And actually, I think Bryan might have been the first person I met, or one of the first few people I met when I got to the work location. But it was pretty evident to me that Bryan had an awful lot of talent and potential that wasn't going to be realized in that location. I wasn't surprised when he left, but when I had heard that Weston was potentially recruiting him to come work for us, I remember specifically going in to speak to the former city manager and our then CFO, and I said, "Listen, if there's any way you can get Bryan, he is the Weston Way. Get him on board." And I'm really glad that they did.
And I had left that other city and gone to another city and worked my way through Parks and Recreation up into the budget office. And we found ourselves working closely again together.
Such a full circle moment, and it's great that you have that history and know each other's work, especially in the work that we do now with crunching the numbers, so they speak. So let's get into that budget process and why it matters.
Well, I think Daryl Thomas, our CFO, once told me a very eloquent way of describing it is a budget is really a statement of the values of the community. Right? So what is important to the city? Mm-hmm. We know it's safety. We know it's aesthetics. We know it's our parks. Okay, well, if that's what's important, then let's figure out a way to make that happen.
Right.
So instead of starting with a number, we're starting with what type of services, what type of a city do we want to be? And then we're figuring out a way to pay for it within the parameters that are available to us through the taxing authority.
I've heard that before from a personal budget perspective. You know, what's important to you is how you spend your money. And so kind of on a full circle, turning that around from a government perspective, what's important to us is how we spend our money in certain areas, and maintaining infrastructure and some of the capital projects coming down in the future, next few years is part of our kind of level of importance and how we structure that.
Exactly. And I think that's the value of having a professional staff with so many years experience in Weston, because I believe we have a pretty good handle on what the expectations are of this community because we've lived it for so many years. Many of us even live in the community. Bryan and I are both residents in Weston, so we have a pretty good handle on what the expectations are out here. So it's our job, and Bryan specifically, to figure out how to deliver that.
And Bryan, the budget as a document serves a purpose. Can you explain what that purpose is?
Sure. It's a crucial tool that we use, and it's done well in advance of the fiscal year. And it's to monitor spending and estimate the revenues. It's essentially the process of calculating how much money is needed for the year and how much the city plans to spend.
Right.
So that's to break it down, that's what a budget is.
And it's a constitutional requirement by the state to pass at a certain date, right?
That's correct. Our city's fiscal year runs from October 1st through September 30th, and that aligns with state law that governs municipal budgets. Budgeting is a year-round process, but we do have to abide by those state laws that say you have to have a balanced budget and you have to pass it based on the city's fiscal year, which is October 1st through September 30th.
Since our fiscal year begins on October 1st, we have budget hearings coming up in September. And how do you schedule those? I know you can't schedule them on certain dates, and kind of explain the rationale behind that.
Sure. In September is when the hearings are scheduled, and you almost have to look backwards and go backwards on a timeline. The state of Florida Department of Revenue puts out what's called the TRIM, the Truth in Millage, and essentially what that says is that you can only do meetings at certain times. You have to allow the Broward County property appraiser to send out the trim notices, and they have to have 20 days to be able to send those out before you can even have the meetings. You can't have the meetings at the same time as the school board or Broward County. So we have to make sure that that doesn't conflict. And then finally, once the final millage rate is approved, you only have 3 days to submit it to the state of Florida so that it can be in compliance. So we look at all those. We work very closely with our city clerk, and we have to do advertising, ads in the newspaper, and make sure the meetings happen on time.
Correct. And I know our listeners may understand at different levels what a millage rate is. And we get those trim notices, those of us that are property owners, we get them in the mail. What exactly is a millage rate, and why is it important to government operations and governmental budgeting?
So it's very important. First of all, the Broward County property appraiser will send out the trim notices beginning mid to late August. Those should be arriving in people's mailboxes. A millage rate is basically the rate of taxation. So all government entities will set what they call a millage rate, and you take that millage rate and you multiply it by the value of property, and essentially that's what the city will receive as ad valorem taxes, better known as property taxes.
Very good. I love that explanation, because there's so many different other funds as well, fire service fee and things of that nature on our notices. So it's good to understand the ad valorem tax is what kind of funds certain operational expenses in the city.
Great point, Pam. In reality, those property taxes fund our city's general fund. Our city's general fund is made up of public safety, which is police and EMS, parks and recreation, general government, comprehensive planning. That's where executive, legislative, legal counsel, all those things get funded by the city's general fund. And this upcoming fiscal year, the city expects to receive about $41 million in ad valorem revenues to fund those parts of the general fund. I will say that all of our general fund revenues are about $72 million. So the $41 million that we bring in from ad valorem taxes basically covers what the cost of public safety is.
Right.
So, that money that comes in is super important so that public safety and other things like parks and recreation and comprehensive planning that I mentioned get funded.
Right. So we always term it as the city manager's proposed budgets before it goes to city commission for their review and approval at the budget hearings. Don, each year you put together a budget message kind of explaining some of the highlights in the budget. And can you tell us about this year's budget message?
Sure.
Theme?
And it starts even a step before that, because the city has operated, as long as I can remember, with a strategic value and business plan.
Yes.
That business plan is our vision going out 10 years. And that document, which is adopted by the city commission, sets the map for where we're going from year to year. And that's where we draw some of, particularly our capital projects, the parks improvements, the infrastructure improvements from that plan. So that informs this year's budget. It will inform next year's budget, not in its entirety. We have flexibility to add projects or remove projects, but it gives us that guide. With that in mind, I take a look at that year once I'm given the numbers from Bryan and Daryl. And, I look for what's the theme, what's going on in this year's budget that we sort of can embrace. And with this year, obviously it's very clear that there's a large capital expenditure that's being proposed for Parks and Recreation, specifically with the Vista Park project and some improvements at Regional Park. So there's a building involved there, was kind of caught my eye. And then I'm mindful of the fact, in fact, I think I talked in the last episode I was a part of, that I'm a big Disney fan. And I remember a quote that Disney said about Disneyland, saying, Disneyland will never be finished. It's always going to need improvement. It's always going to be rebuilt and reimagined. Most cities should be operating that same way. Right. Weston's never going to be done. Right. If it's ever done, that means we're not ever making improvements again, and we're just going to start being dilapidated.
Right.
We always have to make improvements. Some of them are infrastructure improvements, but some of them are to build a better community. And in this case, this year, it's to improve our parks. So building a better community is this year's theme. It obviously strikes to what's happening for the proposed Vista Park project, but it also talks about all the infrastructure projects. We need to
Absolutely.
build our drainage system better. We need to build our street lighting system better. We need to keep getting better, and that's what we're going to focus on in the next year.
Good to understand the strategic process behind how the budget comes together, and that there are these other plans like the strategic value and business plan, the parks master plan, that all kind of come together and lead into the priorities in the budget.
Exactly. We need to understand there's a lot of need out there, and we can't do it all at once.
Right.
Even Weston can't. We're in pretty good shape, but we can't do it all in the same year. So we have to spread out those large expenses over the course of time in order to make sure that we're managing it well and to make sure we're not overburdening our taxpayers. Is a fine balance that you have to
Right.
find there.
And Bryan, can you give us a kind of a walkthrough on how that budget process works throughout the year?
Absolutely. And I like to consider budgeting a year-round process, although, January and February are my chill months. But after that, we formally start our process in March with the assistant city managers, both the chief financial officer, the chief operating officer, myself, all the department heads. We get together, we start looking at the formulation of expenditures, revenues, reserves, anything that we need and what the departments need to move forward in the upcoming year. That starts in March. And then in May, we have what we call the City Commission Workshop, where we sit down with the commission. This year we had it in June. Typically it's in May, but we pushed it to June this year, where we sit down, we discuss all the projected budgets, what the millage rate may look like. We look at the assessments, we look at all the capital projects, and we spend as much time in a workshop setting and speaking about that. And then in June, we get the preliminary estimates of value from the Broward County property appraiser, which helps form our general fund and what we talked about earlier. It forms our ad valorem taxes. And once July comes around, we get the final taxable value from the Broward County property appraiser, and then that is locked in. So then in
You actually
August,
have numbers to work with.
that's
right?
we have everything ready to go. We release the city manager's budget, in July, and then in August we start meeting with the commission, and that's when the trim notices go out, and then we have the 2 public hearings in September.
Right.
And that's there's going to be lots of information and resolutions for the commission to approve to move on to that next step, and we'll have a approved budget, hopefully in September, and begin the fiscal year on October 1st.
And that's a great point. When you say release the budgets are actually publicly available now online under finance. If you go to the westonfl.org and then look for budget, and it's all there, as well as the current fiscal year. You can kind of see how the adopted budget looks for this fiscal year, and then how the proposed budget looks for the upcoming fiscal year, and kind of have a better understanding of what is in the budget and how that looks. That's a general process. All local governments follow in the state of Florida, kind of this fiscal year process and putting those budgets together. They may approach it differently. There's all different kinds of budgeting processes. But what is unique to Weston?
Well, I think we talked about in the last podcast I was a part of that Weston being a contract city was core to starting the city of Weston and maintain the city. It's in our charter that we are going to be a contract city. And so all those contracts drive a lot of the budget. When we put those contracts out, we agree on a price. Those prices are typically increased by the CPI. So we know going into the budget process, well, certainly after we get the February CPI numbers for most of our contracts,
Right.
that a good portion of what we do is going to increase by that number right out of the gate.
Right.
So we already can calculate those in. And then it's a matter of looking back at that strategic value business plan, as I mentioned earlier, and any other projects that are expected to be coming up over the course of the next year that the staff can feed to Bryan and say, okay, we're going to need to do this, we're going to need to do this. And sometimes, just to be clear, some of those projects that we have in our plan maybe operationally don't have to be done. A roadway repaving is a good example. There are times when we have that in the budget, let's say it's planned for 2028. The operations folks say, it doesn't need to be done in 28. We can wait till 2029. And so it is a moving
flexible
living document, just like your own home budget is. I mean, you plan to put the pool on next year, but then the roof needs to be replaced. You're going to push off the pool.
Right. And we are known for having a low millage rate in Broward County. Can you tell us more about what that means?
It's a blessing for sure that our millage rate remains low. Partly it's because we have very high property values.
Right.
Some of that's because of the folks who live out here and the types of homes we have out here, the businesses that we have out here. And we like to think part of that is because of the way we maintain the city. What we spend on our landscaping and on our infrastructure improvements and on our parks makes people want to be out here, and that helps drive up property values. And of course, there's some things that Weston that are not something we can control, but having great schools certainly helps our property values as well. So yes, those property values help us to keep the millage rate low, but by being a contract city, we don't have hundreds, if not thousands, of employees who have to be paid traditional pensions
obligations
and so forth. Yeah. So there are by design, there are some things that we should not encumber as a city, as if we remain a contract city, that will help us to keep that millage rate down. The pension problem is still being experienced in many traditional cities around the country. That's one thing that Weston does not have to be concerned about.
Right. And that's definitely led to that financial stability that year over year the city of Weston has had in our financial processes. Knowing those CPI increases, knowing that we don't have those outsetting pension obligations.
Right. And it's been a little challenging because you don't plan on having a 9% increase in inflation in a given year. So that sometimes these little spikes that happen have to be accounted for at some point, right? So I'll give you a good example. The BSO contract is expected to go up by 8 or 9% this year, and everybody goes, oh, that's a big number. Well, the reality is we were at inflation of 9% for a couple of years during the last version of the agreement, and the BSO could not make that up in those years because their contract was for a cap. So sooner or later, we all have to pay for what we're getting. And in this case, that particular contract, we're catching up this year to make up for a couple years that they were behind.
Being able to kind of hold our millage rate at a certain level is kind of unique as well, because you do have those extra expenses with the CPI increases and contracts going up and things like that. But we've still been able to maintain our millage rate that we propose, like over a 3-year fixed period, which you don't typically see a lot of governments are able to do that. Can you elaborate on that, Bryan?
Sure. And we talked a little bit earlier about the strategic value and business plan and what we do, which is different than a lot of traditional cities where they maybe have a 5-year capital plan. We have a 10-year long-range financial plan. And in that plan, what we try to do is look down the road and see what we need and what our expenses based on the CPIs that we're estimating at that time. And we try to, do the best for our residents and keeping that millage rate flexible and keeping that millage rate at where it's at is helpful to the homeowner, so they don't have to worry about the big spikes from year to year, going up, going down, going up, going down.
No surprises.
No surprises. So we look out, and that's, again, part of our long-range planning, and we try to have that fixed millage rate, and every year we look and see if we can continue that, and we are entering our 8th year at that same millage rate.
Right. Amazing. All righty. Well, on that note, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back to learn more about the highlights that are in this year's upcoming budget. Thank you.
City decisions affect all of us, so why not get involved? Attend a Weston City Commission meeting and learn more about what's happening in your community. Meetings are open to the public, live streamed online, and available as recordings. From parks planning to public safety, your input matters. Visit westonfl.org for dates, times, and agendas. It's your city. Be part of the conversation.
Ready to add a little more activity to your day? Weston's parks are the perfect place to get moving. From paved trails for walking, jogging, or biking, to open fields for stretching, yoga, or just playing catch. Our parks are designed to support healthy living for all ages. We've even got multiple outdoor fitness stations conveniently located throughout various city parks. Regular movement improves mood, boosts energy, and supports long-term wellness. Whether you have 10 minutes or an hour, there's no better place to move than in your local park. Discover all that Weston has to offer at westonfl.org/parks.
And we're back on the Weston Way podcast talking about the upcoming fiscal year 2026 budget for the city of Weston. Before we took the break, we were talking about the budget process in general, a few things about what is unique to Weston. But let's turn the page and look into fiscal year 2026. What are some of the highlights that we have in the budget coming up?
Well, we talked a little bit about Vista Park and the proposed recreation center there, along with some additional outdoor improvements, splash pad, new playground, some improved parking down there, which we know is badly needed in that area of the city. In addition to that, we have the Western Regional Park maintenance building is going to get relocated so that we can make space for more pickleball courts. That might be exciting for people out there.
Yes.
10 years ago, I didn't even know what that word was, and now we're still trying to find places to put pickleball courts. But in addition to the parks projects, we have a lot of projects that are equally important but are going to be less visible to the community. We've got roadway improvements out there. We've got stormwater improvements out there. As I said before, it's fun and it's exciting to build new things, but it's just important as Weston to maintain what we have out there. So we do have some projects. One of them I'm very excited about is because the long-term residents will remember when you used to come into the city off the freeway at Royal Palm, our landscaping used to be very well lit out there. It was a really nice, grand entrance into the community, even at night. And over the years, because of various construction projects that have happened there and just through time, some of those amenities, those lights just are no longer working. And I asked Public Works to take a look at trying to bring that back. So, it's not, a very expensive project and it's not a hugely important project, but it's one that makes Weston different from other communities.
And it gives us that community pride that,
absolutely.
Here, I'm back home. I'm entering my city. So
exactly.
That's awesome.
It's also important to know, just real quick, on some of these other projects, like the roadway projects and so forth, and many times we've talked a lot about ad valorem taxes, but we do have a lot of other revenues that we can tap to pay for projects, or we must tap to pay for projects. I think it's been 5 years ago now or so, the county residents approved a surtax, and that's been specific to transportation projects. And we've had great success over the last 3 years using those proceeds to pay for some of our improvements. We have in our budget proposal for this year, continuing that and continuing to do roadway improvements with that surtax money. And we're always looking for grant opportunities that are out there, typically from the state, sometimes from the federal government. They are pretty good about finding monies for environmental projects, sustainability projects. One of the projects we have in here is to replace some pump station engines. We're in hurricane season right now, and one of the most frequent questions we get from residents is, are the pumps on? They're always on when they need to be on, but we're also maintaining those pumps throughout the year to make sure that they're operating now and into the future as well.
Again, forward thinking on that to make sure that they're in the most recent technology and everything, so that when we do need to pull them, all systems go, they're ready to go.
Absolutely.
And we talk about, it's a good point that you brought that in, because we were focused on the general fund budget, but we do call it budgets, and it is, there are multiple budget documents that are part of this big process. We don't need to get into the full details. Everything's available online, but kind of explain a little bit about the different budgets that are there.
The City Commission will pass 3 budgets. One is for the City of Weston. The other 2 are for the dependent special districts that we have. One is Indian Trace Development District.
Right.
The second one is the Bonaventure Development District. Most people hear those names, but they don't know exactly what it is.
Right.
Sometimes I get calls from people who say, I live in Bonaventure, but is that still the City of Weston? So, the city of
That's
Weston
true.
kind of encompasses both of those districts, and those districts are set aside for water management and rights of way. So we have separate budgets that we do pass for those. They do have separate projects, rights of way type landscaping, lighting. It might be waterways, the culverts, those type of things get funded through those assessments.
Okay, very good. If you have any questions on those and you're not sure of, what that means, the Indian Trace Development District, Bonaventure Development District, it can be confusing. How can residents learn more?
The budgets are online, and you can even find the budgets under the individual district pages that are online. Anyone can call me. My phone number, I will give out the city's phone number, 954-385-2000. You can call us or you can email us at any time. We'd rather you call us, when you have the question than wait 3 months, to
Right.
go to. We welcome you to come to a commission meeting in the budget hearings. But if you have a question
Before
3
then,
months
yeah.
prior, please give us a call and we
Absolutely.
will absolutely help you understand. And that's important because when the trim notices come out, the trim notices will show up in your mailbox. And on those trim notices, it will have the phone numbers from all the taxing authorities where you may have a question. So people may not know this, but on your trim notice, you will have information from Broward County, the Broward County School Board, the hospital districts, the water management districts, and others. And so it can get confusing. The city of Weston is also on there, and we are one piece of your overall tax bill.
Right.
So we can certainly handle and answer your questions if you have about the city of Weston. We may have to put you in touch with Broward County if you have questions about your tax bill
Absolutely.
for Broward.
But it's important to note that all of those numbers are on your trim notice. So you'll have direct contact with any of the taxing authorities just by picking up the phone and calling.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you both for coming on the show today. I want to ask Dawn if you have any final thoughts to share with our listeners about the budget and the budget process.
Well, one thing I do want to point out before we go, because this is a project that will touch every single homeowner, whether you're an Indian Trace or Bonaventure, and we failed to mention it earlier, but there's a project coming up that will probably start in the coming fiscal year and roll over into the following fiscal year, and that is the replacement of every water meter in the city with a new automated meter. There's a lot of benefits to these new automated meters. One of them is that your readings will be much more accurate, so you will be paying specifically for the amount of water that you're using. It will also make it much more easier for Sunrise to collect all the data about that information. It'll be automated instead of some guy walking down the street looking at every single meter. But also, one of the advantages of this new technology is that it will help you identify a leak that could be happening in your home before you even realize it's happening. And one of the biggest complaints we get is somebody gets this spiked water bill. Well,
Right.
Sunrise gets the complaint. Weston doesn't, let's be clear. They'll get a spiked water bill and be like, oh my gosh, what happened? And they didn't realize they had this small leak that was running for a month or two.
Right.
And all that water was running through the system and getting billed, and then shock, there it is. So as I understand this technology, if that's happening, you could find that out relatively quickly with these new automated meters and get it repaired before that becomes a problem. So that's going to start in the next fiscal year, but it's probably going to take a couple years because there's 20-some thousand meters out there. They're going to have to get replaced.
Right. And we'll have more information about that project coming soon on our website as well about the automated meter installations
Exactly.
for residential and commercial customers throughout Weston.
Exactly. And I want to reiterate what Bryan said because it sounds like a throwaway line. Just call us if you have a question, but it really is not.
Right.
We really do want residents to reach out if they've got concerns or if they've got questions. We're not going to answer every single question in a way that might satisfy 100% of the people, but we're going to answer the question. And our staff is excellent at that. They relish the opportunity to provide that information and provide a little more education because we do know government can be intimidating or confusing. It's a different beast, but that's what we're here for. And we want people to reach out, and we will take that time. I guarantee you that if you can't get a hold of one of the excellent staff members, they can ask to speak to me as well.
Absolutely. We always encourage our residents to get their information straight from the source. instead of relying on information that may be floating around like on social media or, throughout neighborhoods. If you have a question, call us. Look online. We have information available on the website and in our Newsday Tuesday newsletter weekly. We try to put as much information that is timely for residents to understand those projects and even the budget process, et cetera.
And let me add one more thing. The budget is a product of all of us. It's not just the staff. It's not just the commission. If there's something that you think Weston needs that we don't have yet, let us know. If there's something that we're not doing well or something we could do better, let us know. And the best example of that is pickleball. I remember vividly the first person who called me up when I was a parks director and said, you need pickleball courts. And I didn't even know what that was. And that was only 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. And he said, you haven't heard of pickleball? You got to look it up. Yeah. And now, 6 years later, we've got pickleball courts all over the city, and we're looking to find a pickleball. That's because a resident just said to a parks director, you need some pickleball courts. So please let us know if there's something out there that we're not delivering that we might be able to.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Bryan, for coming to the studio today, talking about budget. And thank you to our listeners for listening in and learning more about your city.
Thank you.
As temperatures rise, so does the risk of heat-related illness. Stay safe when you're enjoying our beautiful Weston parks or working outside. Hydrate regularly, wear light-colored clothing, and take breaks in the shade or air conditioning. And don't forget sunscreen and bug spray. Heat exhaustion and dehydration can come on quickly, so take it slow and stay cool. A little preparation goes a long way.
Well, that was a great conversation you had with Bryan and Dawn, Pam.
Yes, it was very cool to really get a deep dive into the budget process.
Yeah, working here for now just recently 5 years,
Yes,
it's still a process that, thank you, it's still a process that even, myself, I'm not entirely familiar with all the inner workings. So to hear from them, all the details and all the time it takes to build this budget and to receive that feedback, it's eye-opening.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's just, it goes to show you that the budget isn't just, a series of numbers. It's how, a city leadership plans for Weston's future.
Right. Absolutely. And we encourage our listeners to get involved and learn more about their city by viewing the budget online. It's available at westonfl.org/budget. That's where you can access our city budget page. It has the city manager's proposed budgets for fiscal year 2026, which begins October 1st. That's what we were talking about today. Mm-hmm. But it also has our current budget online, so you can kind of take a look at what we are wrapping up for fiscal year 2025.
Yeah, I know it was a priority for us to get this episode out now because it's getting out ahead of this coming budget. And a lot of folks, don't hear about the budget necessarily, or maybe aren't quite paying attention to the budget until it's already passed and already gone through, right? And then they have all these questions for it. And so that's why it was important for us to get this out now, early. Put these dates in your calendar, reach out to Bryan and to Dawn even, and they're sure to get you the information you need and make sure that your voice is heard.
Yes, and once again, those budget hearings are Monday, September 15th and Monday, September 29th at 7 p.m. It's part of the City Commission meetings for those evenings, and you will receive your TRIM notice. That's your Truth and Millage notice that Bryan spoke about during the episode, from mid-August to end of August. Watch for that in your mailbox. It'll have all of the different phone numbers for the taxing authorities, including the City of Weston. Our phone number is 954-385-2000. That's how you can reach Bryan or Dawn with any of your budget questions, or you can email us at cityhall@westonfl.org. Email your budget questions, and we will get that over to Bryan, and he will get back to you.
And at that, we encourage you to continue to follow your city media for all the latest updates on the City of Weston. Subscribe to our Newsday Tuesday e-newsletter, follow us on all of your social media channels, and make sure you periodically check the city website for all the latest updates. And continue, please, to listen to the podcast, subscribe to the podcast, and share it amongst your friends and neighbors.
Thank you for listening.
Bye.